Hello guys, it's Mr. HorrorBot. Today I will be doing 5 true horrifying Skype calls. Number 5. A while ago, my friend Hannah mysteriously disappeared. We had been talking and getting close, on the verge of dating actually, and then one day she disappeared. She didn't tell anyone where she went and took no social media with her. Never came home and no one could find her. Which makes what has happened incredibly frightening to me. Last night, around 2 a.m., I was playing Dota 2 when my game alt-tabbed. It does this whenever someone comes online for Skype, so I checked to see who it was before tabbing back in. It was Hannah. I immediately clicked her name and typed a message to her. Just sent Hannah, and waited a few minutes, she didn't reply. She then went offline. There was no way this was a friend or family member. She never trusted any of her friends with passwords. I didn't even know her Skype username. What was worse about all of this was at 2 a.m. Which is when her and I always logged on to talk to each other. I decided that the online was just a bug on Skype's part, but it worried me. She wouldn't go offline immediately, and she had been gone for 2 years. I'm certain she would have at least sent a can't talk and went offline. After all of this, I finished up my game and went to bed. The next day nothing abnormal happened. I sent her a few messages but she was offline. I told her that I missed her and hoped she would talk to me soon. The rest of the day was no different, stayed up late playing more Dota when at around 2:30 a.m. I got alt-tabbed again. This wasn't an online notification. This was a call from Hannah. I immediately answered and started talking right away, asking if it was her. There was no reply, but about 2 minutes later I noticed her webcam switching on. But this was weird, because she didn't have a webcam. She always talked to me on her phone and never used video. She didn't even have a laptop. The next thing I saw was her. She was right up in front of the camera, sitting in a chair. But it was different. Her hair was ragged, she had a covering over her eyes, and it was incredibly dark. Hannah looked as if she was binded to the chair as well. I said her name again, and she smiled. A really fucked up grin. Then the call hung up. Ever since then, she's been sending me repeated messages of things I sent her. Her name has changed and her Skype picture has changed into a dark picture of a woman that I think is her. I'm absolutely terrified. I don't know what the fuck is going on and I'm too afraid to respond or even take a screenshot. I logged off Skype, and I'm going to call the police and see if we can somehow trace it. Because I don't know what else to do. I'll call the police, see what happens and then update. Most of you suggested I should video call her, and I finally mustered myself up and did it. The call didn't last long. I only got 2 answers. This time a man answered. He had face wrappings and was in the same room as the picture sent to me. But it was dark and I couldn't see well. The conversation went like this. I asked him who he was, and he stood still for a moment before snickering at me. He then whispered Samuel. This made me freeze up. I decided to ask him what he wanted with me and Hannah. I wish to be your savior. In a very dry and monotone voice, he said this before breaking out in a fit of laughter. I was too scared to even react. The call then shut down and it went back to the steady stream of messages. But now occasionally he adds in you didn't protect her. I'm scared out of my fucking mind. Mostly because my name is Samuel. Number 4. My mother took her own life 3 years ago. It took a huge toll of me emotionally, since we had always been so close and I'd always thought we could talk about anything. She'd always been a very spiritual person too. Not religious as such, just spiritual. She was fascinated with Wicca and used to read on the subject extensively. But just over 3 years ago she took a bottle of pills and her own life, leaving me and my father behind to deal with the loss. Most of my school life dropped away. I was heavily into athletics before she passed, especially high jump. She used to call me her little Jiminy Cricket because of the way I made jumping look so easy, but after her death it just made me sad by reminding me of her. I just felt so betrayed because she always said she would be around to love me and care for me and keep me safe and out of danger. When I lost her I just locked myself away, ignoring my friends, neglecting my studies, I just didn't care anymore. The Skype calls started a couple of days ago. My dad broke the news that he was selling the house. He says he just can't deal with the memories anymore and I can't blame him. This house has been in my mother's family for generations, it's like some sort of piece of history. We used to get insane offers all the time, but my mom always refused. Now that she's gone though, there isn't much keeping us here. It inspired me to go through some of her things though. Photos, letters, trinkets, and things. We were supposed to bury them with her but I held onto them in secret, I'm not really sure why. I'd avoided looking at them since her death, but since we would need to start packing I thought it was inevitable anyway. I even found her diary. It was bittersweet, poring over those memories. Things to do with her life, her thoughts about me, how proud she said she was. It made me tear up. But then I got to the last few entries. She wrote about her and Dad arguing more and more. She suspected he was having an affair and he kept pressuring her to sell the house, but she wouldn't. She wrote how she would wake up at night and catch him staring at her while she slept. She sounded scared. That was when the Skype calls started. My tablet would start ringing when I was asleep. The first time I was so sleepy that I never noticed the name. The call seemed glitched, I got annoyed and closed it. But then it called back. And I read my mother's name. I have no idea why I didn't hurl the tablet away, but I answered again and paid more attention. I know it's her. There's no doubt. She's been calling me every night. I can't sleep. I recorded some of the call so I had proof that I wasn't imagining things. What's worse is that I think my dad is watching me. I think I catch him peering through my door at night. Sometimes after my mother calls. It's 4 a.m., I can't sleep and my mother hasn't called yet. I swear I can hear somebody standing outside my door. I don't know what to do. Number 3. So, something happened to me a few weeks ago, that I feel like you guys should know about. I'm not entirely sure what exactly happened, and to be honest, I'm still a little shaken up by it. But, I will recount it for you all here, and hopefully you all can somehow make sense of it, because I sure as hell can't. I was Skyping my cousin who lives at the opposite end of the country, in Missouri. We're pretty close, and we Skype pretty much every chance we get. It was late, I think it was around midnight for me, which would have made it 11 o'clock for her. We had been talking for about half an hour, when she went downstairs to get something to eat. I patiently waited for her while watching videos on YouTube. After a 20-minute video had ended, I looked up to see that she still hadn't returned. I thought this was strange, but perhaps she got a phone call while getting her food or something. So, I kept waiting. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. 30 minutes. Pretty soon, it had been an hour since she had initially went downstairs. That's when I noticed that her room was getting darker. It was like the light bulbs in her room were slowly getting dimmer and dimmer. I hadn't noticed it at all until now. I was hesitant on whether or not I should keep the call running, but for whatever reason, I decided to keep waiting. 30 more minutes passed, and still no sign of her. All the while, her room was getting darker and darker. It was almost to the point where her room was pitch black when I saw her. In the dim, brownish leftover light, I looked in the mirror that was hanging on her wall. I could see her standing just inside her room. She was eerily still, not even blinking if I remember correctly. She was staring off into something, with an blank, expressionless look on her face. I was dumbfounded, and honestly, pretty scared. How long had she been standing there? Had she been standing there this whole time? I called out her name, To no answer. I said it louder, and asked if she could hear me, again to no answer. That's when I heard the noise. It's hard to describe, partially since I couldn't hear it all too well, but the best way I can describe it is that it was like a speaker playing unrelenting static, only blocked by something like a wall. Sorry to go off on a tangent, imagine that, turned down, and muffled by a bunch of blankets. That's what it sounded like. I didn't catch it at first, but then it started to get slowly louder. It was still very quiet, yet more noticeable. I was starting to get freaked out at this point. I called out to my cousin over and over again. All the while, the noise slowly got louder and the room slowly got darker. Just when the room was actually about to go completely dark, I saw my cousin look down through the mirror, and at me for a split second, before the call abruptly ended. I was dumbstruck. I didn't know what the hell to do. Do I try to call her back? Do I call the police? I had been in a flurry of frantic thoughts for about 5 minutes before she began calling me again. I was tentative in answering, as you can imagine, but I eventually worked up the courage to press the button and answer her. There she was, sitting on her bed. She Skyped me with her iPad, eating a taco. She then asked me why I had hung up the call. I didn't say anything. I told her that maybe my connection was shitty or some other stupid excuse. Part of me felt like if I outright asked her what the hell happened, she wouldn't believe me. I did ask, however, if anything went wrong while she was downstairs. She said no, all she did was pee, heat up a taco in the microwave and come back to her room. She said she might have been gone for about 5 minutes, even though nearly 2 hours had gone by without her there. I hate to say it, but I just brushed it off. I had no idea what the fuck happened, I still don't, and I had no rational explanation for it, so I just let it slip my mind. She was back after all. Things carried on as normal for about 2 hours. We joked around, talked about music, watched stupid YouTube videos, and just talked about life in general. It was good. I had nearly forgotten about the first call when suddenly she froze. Her eyes were locked on something across the room. Her face was once again in that empty, blank, emotionless expression. She almost looked like a mannequin. I called out her name, and that's when I started to hear the noise again. It was louder now, much more coherent and decipherable. Parts of it sounded like voices. It was unintelligible, but the fluctuations within it matched that of someone rapidly talking, like they were anxious about something. I screamed her name into my computer, asked if she could hear me, but nothing. She just kept staring at whatever was across the room. That's when I got the impulse to look into her mirror. It is very hard to describe what I saw in her mirror. Just like before, it showed the doorway, but something was in front of it. The most reasonable and logical way I can describe it was as if you were watching a 3D movie without 3D glasses on. I know that sounds dumb, and doesn't sound at all like what I described, but words are limited to what they can portray. I think whatever that thing was broke that limit. It looked like a humanoid figure. However, it was standing on the ceiling, hanging upside down just above where my cousin stood in the last call. Its head was black, misshapen, and too big for its body. But the most unsettling thing about it was that it was shaking and convulsing wildly. Its head and sometimes its torso would jerk and twitch constantly like it was having a seizure. I can only guess that is what my cousin was staring at. After a few seconds of seeing that awful thing hanging there, I was about to call out my cousin's name again, when the call, once again, abruptly ended. A few seconds after the call ended, my Skype application closed completely on its own. I reopened it and tried to message her, but it wouldn't let me send them. I called the police, and naturally they brushed it off and said they'd take care of it, but I know they won't do a damn thing. So, now I'm writing this down here. I haven't heard from her in 2 weeks now. Every time I try to call her, be it on a phone or over Skype, I am met with no answer. I've even called her parents, and when I ask them about her the phone hangs up. I'm scared. I don't know what happened to her, but whatever was in her room that night could not have been good. I pray that she's alright. Number 2. I honestly don't know what to think right now. I might be crazy. I know this sounds crazy, but let me shed some light. I'm 20 years old, recently moved out of state from my hometown, where my family still resides. I have 2 older brothers and a little sister. She's still living with my parents, being only 16 and all. They live in Nevada and I'm now in California. Well, I Skype my parents a lot, but not nearly as much as my sister. I guess you can say we're really close. For privacy reasons we'll call my sister Allison. So last night around 9 I was on Reddit, just scrolling through the front page when my eye got a Skype call from Allison. That was a little weird because she usually goes to sleep around 9 on school nights, but I figured she was still getting into the routine and couldn't sleep, so I accepted. The video feed took a while to load, and when it finally did the resolution was more pixelated than usual. Poor internet connection was I summed it up as right away. Hey sissy, she smiled at the screen, but that smile looked like sad one. What's up love? Oh nothing new, my friend Alex got a car for her birthday so she took us out in it for some dinner. Oh, where'd you go? I leaned closer to the camera. Oh, just McDonald's. We both let out a chuckle. I really miss you, she sounded really sad, and she looked like she was about to cry. I miss you too, I'll come home and visit soon. Then my phone rang. Hold on, Mom is calling, I'll be right back. I got up. Allison looked like she was going to be sick, but I turned my back to the screen and walked away. I quickly clicked the accept call on my phone. Hey Mom, what's up? Hey honey, are you at home? Is it okay to talk? She sounded really upset. Yeah, I can talk for a minute. I started walking aimlessly through my small apartment. Well, I have some bad news. It's Allison. Does it have to do with school? Did she get in trouble already? I wish that were the case. She sounded as if she had just gotten done crying. She got into an accident an hour ago. We're at the hospital right now. She's in critical condition. I froze. That was impossible. I was literally on Skype with her right now. What? I choked out, as I started heading back to the computer. I'm not sure if she's going to make it. They're taking her into surgery. Who was she with? I asked, already knowing the answer. Alex, and some other kids from school. What happened to Alex? She died on impact. I noticed something odd about my Skype then, where my sister's face was now just a black box. The message bubble underneath had a notification, so I clicked on it. I wish our time was longer. Maybe we can talk later. Tell Mom I am sorry. I'll try to keep in touch. Love you. Mariah, are you still there? My mom sniffed. Why yeah, I'll come home tomorrow, I promise. I choked out. I didn't want to tell her what I had seen. Okay sweetie, I'll keep you updated. Love you. I felt myself crying as I said it back. This wasn't happening. What the fuck happened? How could I Skype my sister that was being prepped for surgery? It doesn't make any sense. Before I got on the road my mom said that Allison was still unconscious, but hooked up to a ventilator. I feel like I'm going insane. I had to share this. I just got to my mom's house, and I had to get this off my chest. Keeping it to myself would make me crazier. Edit, update. I'm in the waiting room at the hospital right now. Allison is in a kind of small room, only one person is allowed back there at a time, they said her heart rate was slowing, so the nurses are constantly checking on her. She looks awful to tell you the truth. Her face is all bruised up. I'm pretty sure she hit it on the dashboard or window. I don't know where she Saturday. I don't know what kind of operation they did, just know she flatlined while she was under, which my mom told me right after I saw her. That was at 9:30 last night. That's when I saw the message on Skype. Edit, update to 8:44 p.m. Nurses just flooded her room, I can hear the noise of the heart monitor, one continuous beep, my mom got ushered out, she's in tears. First words, I think this is it. I got a text, but I didn't check it yet, I barely do when I'm browsing Reddit, trying to keep myself busy, but my heart sank when I read it. Death is here. Edit, 11:17 p.m. Pretty sure my mom cried herself to sleep. I can't keep my eyes closed, I keep hearing Allison's voice play back in my head. I'm exhausted, and her cat won't stop staring at me, she won't come closer than 4 feet. I don't know what that's all about, she'd usually be up in my face when I'd come home before. This stare is a bit unnerving. Also, I found out they never recovered Allison's phone from the wreck. I keep looking at her messages. And that damn bubble that lets you know they're typing is there. It's been there every time I look at that last message for the past 2 hours. Number 1. Things you should know before reading this entry. This story will touch on some trigger topics. If you cannot deal with rape, moral and sexual torture, you likely should not read this story. With that said, I'll try and figure out where to start. It's just a normal night. My wife and I, we're both girls, are settling down for a good night's rest. We're laying in bed, browsing StumbleUpon, somewhat of a nightly ritual for us, and chuckling back and forth at the oddities we find online. That's when it started. I don't know how to describe it. This feeling gripped me, one that I've never felt before. Going from calm and relaxed, ready to sleep, to something I don't even know how to explain. I was laughing somewhat uncontrollably in small spurts. I don't even remember it all. Just the laughing. This near crazy on the verge of panic yet still deep-throaty confident snickering that was just completely not my own. More so, I remember that it had my wife, Adrienne, on edge. Adrienne is a pretty laid-back person, and more so she's extremely level-headed and cool in odd/unnerving situations. Rightfully worried about me, I remember her consoling me while I tried to rein in my laughter between tears, but that's when it all started to get fuzzy. The next thing I remember, I was sitting upright in bed and she was rambling on about a bridge and a gatekeeper. Meanwhile, something is tugging at the back of my mind beyond everything that has already happened, that something really isn't right in the atmosphere around us. Regardless, I get her to slow down long enough for her to explain to me that I had had a long conversation with her about a being called the gatekeeper. Whatever roundabout conversation she'd had with me, apparently it had been hard for her to get any details. As I typed before, literally just that there was a gatekeeper and a bridge. As we're talking, we're both becoming more and more distracted, until we both realize that we're periodically glancing up towards the roof, and that we both had been hearing the same set of movements above us upon it. The conversation came to an eerie halt as we listened to it for a bit. It was light enough to have been some sort of small animal, we both agreed on that. And she, naturally being the braver of both of us, went to the door and windows, which our cat was very actively patrolling as well. As it was, I was still too scared to move, sitting on the bed in our one-room studio apartment just staring as Adrienne went from door to window looking for the culprit of the sounds. What she did see was a small shadow, likely a head, before it disappeared, as did the movement sounds above us. Both pretty creeped out at this point, I had eventually coaxed her back to bed, armed with lock-blade pocket knife, with me where we laid there talking. The more we talked, the calmer we grew, and eventually she was spilling more details from my fuzzy moments prior. 3 days ago I started to experience horrible reoccurring dreams, dreams I had only just confessed to her about last night and not in great detail. The content of these dreams is extremely upsetting for me. So much so, that when I told her about them the first time I was literally in tears. When it comes to relationships, I am incredibly loyal. Almost to a fault. The thought of being disloyal to my lover is incredibly upsetting. So when these dreams began, to say that they upset me, would be a huge understatement. In the dreams there is a being, one who can take the shape of familiar people, or even rather just their identities without having an appearance at all. It is a dominant presence that makes you sick to your stomach with fear when it is near you. I have only as of tonight, with these awake events starting to take place, begun calling it the handler. The dreams are all the same. They run on the same timeline with glitches, as if someone were watching a movie, walked away for 30 minutes, and then came back, which would be the next night's dream. Time continues in them even after I have woken up. In the first dream I was literally kidnapped. Fighting tooth and nail, screaming, I was pulled away from Adrian. Literally right out of her protective arms. When I woke up, in the dream, I was chained down and gagged. To give as little detail as possible, pleasure was forced upon me by the handler. It was forced upon me until it made sure I had started to enjoy it against my will. It took months in the dream. I don't enjoy pleasure from anyone other than Adrian. She is the love of my life, and it's hard for me to even look past her to see anyone else in a sexual manner. I don't want pleasure from anyone else. This in itself was extremely upsetting and disturbing to me when I woke up from it. It wasn't just sexual torture, it was focusing on the moral torture of the event. I knew that what the handler wanted me to experience was the literal rape of my personal morals. I haven't felt the same since then, honestly. I've had this unnerved feeling hanging over me like a cloud. And what's worse is that it continues every night. The second dream didn't pick up where the last one left off. It continued what seemed like weeks later, where the handler was still at it. To add to the awfulness of the situation, it showed me images of how hard Adrian had been searching for me since. Searching and searching, but unable to find anything she could really follow. I can't explain hopelessness like I felt in those dreams. I've never in my life experienced anything like that. After explaining these in more detail, some of what had happened when I fuzzed out made more sense to Adrian. In that odd state that I can't remember anything about, I had apparently told Adrian of a gatekeeper. Something about how he had allowed me past, over the bridge. I recounted those moments of the dream after I had woken up. They never stopped. The dreams don't stop when I wake up. It's like, there's a swap. I have no idea how to explain it, any of it. We were dawning on this conclusion when both of us heard a noise unlike any we've ever experienced in our entire lives. Like a dying animal, grinding gears, and whispering in another language all at once. It was the scariest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. It went on for a good 20 seconds while Adrian, being the brave motherfucker she is, got out of bed to investigate where the sounds were coming from, the kitchen. At this time, I swear I also saw the bed sheets move after she had already left the bed. The sound slowed down, like static interference, cutting in and out until after about a minute they'd stopped entirely as Adrian entered the kitchen. After that we directly pulled up a Skype call with a close friend, and we've had our Skypes on ever since, about 2 hours now. It's been quiet, nothing further happening. Neither of us can sleep, and while Adrian doesn't claim to be, I'm pretty sure we're both scared shitless. She has to go to work in the morning, and I'm supposed to spend the day here alone like usual, however I am terrified to do so. I've experienced some freaky shit in my life. But this is a whole new level of WTF. I have no idea what to do. The only thing I could think of, was to recount my story here while it was still fresh. It's 3:30 a.m. in the morning. The last of the events ended at 12:59 a.m. Help me to sleep.